Jamal Whitmore knew his father's death wasn't natural, but he never imagined the depths of darkness lurking behind his stepmother's elegant facade. As he pieces together the truth, Veronica Whitmore, a woman who built her life on deception, realizes that her stepson has come too close to exposing her secrets. Trapped in the grand estate that once symbolized wealth and power, Jamal finds himself in a deadly game where the truth could cost him his life. The walls close in, the clock ticks down, and in a final confrontation, only one of them will make it out alive. Before we dive into this gripping story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The Whitmore estate stood like a monument to success, a sprawling mansion of pristine white stone and glass that reflected the Atlanta skyline. Inside, the scent of fresh lilies filled the grand foyer, their fragrance masking the silence that had settled over the house since Marshall Whitmore's sudden death. His widow, Veronica, sat in the vast living room, perfectly poised, her manicured fingers tracing the rim of a crystal glass. She played the part of the grieving wife well, but behind her dark eyes was something colder, something untouched by sorrow. Jamal Whitmore had never fully accepted the story of his father's passing. A heart attack at 56, they had said, but the man had been in perfect health. Something about the way Veronica had handled the funeral, the rushed cremation, the way she moved on so seamlessly left a knot of doubt in his chest. Now, months later, he found himself sitting in that same grand estate, staring across the room at the woman who had become both his caretaker and his greatest mystery. He shifted in his chair, the weight of unspoken words pressing against his ribs. His father's office had been locked since the night he died. But that morning, Veronica had finally given him the key. The invitation had seemed generous, but Jamal knew better. It was a test. She wanted to see what he would do, how far he would push. He had spent the day sifting through old files, looking for anything that felt out of place. And then he had found it. A single document, buried beneath years of financial records. A change in Marshall's life insurance policy signed mere weeks before his death. The original beneficiary had been Jamal, but the new paperwork shifted everything to Veronica. A chill crawled down his spine as he stared at her. The woman who had once kissed his forehead goodnight, now watching him with quiet calculation. "You have been quiet lately, Jamal," she said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "I hope you are not overworking yourself. Grief can be exhausting." Jamal forced a smile, but his pulse pounded in his ears. "I have just been thinking about Dad a lot, remembering things." Veronica tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Memories are tricky," she murmured. "Sometimes we remember what we want to believe, rather than the truth." The air between them tightened, heavy with something unspoken. Jamal knew he had stepped into dangerous territory, but he also knew one thing for certain. If Veronica Whitmore had taken his father's life, she had done so without fear, and that made her more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Jamal sat in his small apartment, the dim light from his desk lamp casting long shadows against the wall. The document lay in front of him, his father's signature stark against the page. He had read it a dozen times, tracing the ink as if looking harder would reveal something new. The change in the life insurance policy was too convenient, too perfectly timed. He thought of Veronica, her cold stare, the way she spoke in measured words. She wasn't a grieving widow. She was a woman who had planned everything. He picked up his phone and dialed Malik Johnson. The line rang twice before his best friend answered, his voice groggy. "Jamal. Do you know what time it is?" "I need to talk," Jamal said, his voice low. "Meet me at the press room in an hour." An hour later, they sat in the back corner of the nearly empty cafe, the scent of burnt coffee thick in the air. Jamal slid the document across the table. Malik frowned as he read, his sharp journalist's mind piecing it together as quickly as Jamal had. "This isn't just suspicious. This is motive," he muttered. Jamal nodded, his stomach twisting. "That's what I thought, but I need more. If she really did this, I need to prove it." Malik leaned back, running a hand over his beard. If she was bold enough to change the policy, she was bold enough to cover her tracks. But nobody commits a crime without leaving something behind. Jamal thought of his father's office, the way Veronica had finally let him inside. Maybe she wasn't testing him. Maybe she was taunting him, daring him to find what she had buried. His mind raced with possibilities. There had to be something she had missed. A message, a record, something that told the real story. "Be careful, man," Malik warned. "Veronica isn't just some woman who married rich. She played the long game. And if she thinks you're getting too close, you won't be the first Whitmore she gets rid of." Jamal stared down at the document, the paper suddenly feeling heavier in his hands. He had always known his father's death didn't make sense. Now, for the first time, he could see the shape of the truth. The problem was, so could Veronica. And if she had killed before, she wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Jamal returned to the Whitmore estate under the cover of night, the weight of his father's memory pressing against him with every step. The house loomed in eerie silence, its grand walls hiding more than just luxury. He moved cautiously through the hallway, his pulse quickening as he approached the office door. The key felt cold in his palm as he slid it into the lock, the quiet click echoing in the stillness. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and dust, untouched since the day Marshall Whitmore died. Jamal's hands moved quickly over the desk, pulling open drawers, shifting papers, searching for something, anything that would confirm his suspicions. He found bank statements, property deeds, but nothing that screamed murder. His frustration built as he rifled through folders, until finally his fingers brushed against something unexpected. A small black flash drive. Jamal's heart pounded as he shoved it into his pocket, ready to leave, but the moment he turned, a voice stopped him cold. Looking for something? Veronica stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of the hallway light. She was dressed in an elegant silk robe, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look regal, untouchable. But Jamal saw the flicker in her eyes, the sharp, assessing look of someone who knew they had been betrayed. "Just some of Dad's old things," he said, forcing his voice to stay even. "I was feeling nostalgic." Veronica took a slow step forward, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. "Nostalgia is dangerous, Jamal. It has a way of making us see things that aren't there." He tightened his grip on the flash drive in his pocket. What was on it? A will. A confession. Whatever it was, he knew one thing. Veronica didn't want him to have it. She smiled then, a slow, knowing curve of her lips. "You remind me of your father. Stubborn, always digging where he shouldn't." Jamal swallowed hard, holding her gaze. Maybe that's why someone wanted him gone. A silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. Then Veronica laughed softly, a sound that sent a chill down his spine. "Careful, darling. You wouldn't want to end up like him." Jamal forced himself to nod, playing along, but every muscle in his body screamed to run. As he stepped past her, her perfume lingered in the air, sweet and intoxicating, masking the poison that lurked beneath. He didn't look back as he walked out the door. He didn't need to. He could feel her eyes on him, watching, calculating. He had found something she wanted hidden, and now he knew she wouldn't rest until she made sure he never looked again. Jamal gripped the flash drive in his hand like a lifeline as he sat in his car outside Malik's apartment. The city lights flickered across his windshield, but his mind was trapped in the darkness of his father's office, in the way Veronica had watched him, unblinking, like a predator studying its prey. His gut told him he was running out of time. If Veronica suspected he had found something, she wouldn't wait to make her next move. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heartbeat hammering in his ears as he knocked on Malik's door. When his friend opened it, his expression shifted from irritation to concern in an instant. "Jamal, what the hell?" "I found something," Jamal cut in, stepping inside and locking the door behind him. He pulled out the flash drive and placed it on the table between them. "I don't know what's on it yet, but Veronica didn't want me to have it. That's all I need to know." Malik didn't waste time. He grabbed his laptop, plugged in the drive, and opened the files. They both leaned in as the screen lit up with documents, financial statements, private emails, and a single grainy audio file labeled "Final Conversation." Jamal's chest tightened. Play it. Malik clicked and a voice crackled through the speakers. His father's voice. I know what you did, Veronica. You think I wouldn't find out? You've made a mistake. A pause. Then a woman's voice, smooth as silk. Darling, you should have stayed blind. Jamal's blood ran cold. The conversation ended with a long silence, then a sharp noise, a sound like a glass breaking or a struggle, then nothing. He stared at the screen, his pulse hammering. This was it. Proof that his father knew Veronica had betrayed him. Proof that she had been behind it all. We take this to the police, Malik said firmly. Jamal shook his head. You think she doesn't own half the force? This is bigger than just evidence. I need a plan. Before Malik could argue, Jamal's phone buzzed. A single message. Come home. Let's talk. No more games. Veronica. His stomach twisted. She knew. Malik stood. This is a trap. Jamal exhaled slowly, slipping the flash drive back into his pocket. I know, but if she wants to talk, that means she's scared. He turned toward the door, already feeling the weight of what was coming. One way or another, this night would end everything. Jamal pulled up to the Whitmore estate, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The mansion loomed before him, its windows glowing faintly in the night, like the eyes of a beast watching his approach. He knew this was a mistake. Malik had begged him not to go, but Jamal couldn't turn back now. Veronica was scared, and scared people made mistakes. If he played this right, he could finally expose her. The front door was already open. She was waiting. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of lilies overwhelming him. The house was too quiet. No staff, no movement. Just the heavy silence that wrapped around him like a noose. Veronica stood at the base of the grand staircase, dressed in black silk, her expression unreadable. You came, she murmured, tilting her head as if she were surprised. You asked me to, Jamal replied, keeping his voice even. You said no more games. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Come, let's have a drink. Jamal followed her into the lounge, where a bottle of bourbon sat open on the marble bar. She poured 2 glasses and handed him one. He didn't drink. Instead, he set it down carefully on the table beside him, watching her. I assume you've been busy, Veronica said, swirling her own glass, digging through things that don't concern you. Everything about my father concerns me. She sighed, setting her drink down as well. You're your father's son, all right. Always convinced you're one step ahead. Jamal reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive. I found this in his office. He knew, didn't he? That's why you killed him. Veronica didn't flinch, didn't blink. Instead, she let out a soft, almost amused chuckle. Killed him? My dear boy, you really do have an imagination. Jamal leaned forward. The recording, Veronica. It's over. Her smile vanished. For the first time, something shifted in her eyes. Something cold and sharp, like a blade catching the light. Then why are you here? If it's over, why walk into my home? Jamal hesitated. That was his mistake. Before he could react, she moved. Quick, precise. A glint of metal flashed in the dim light. A syringe in her hand. He stumbled back, but she was faster. The needle bit into his neck, a sharp sting, cold liquid burning through his veins. Jamal gasped, reaching for her, but his limbs felt heavy. The room tilted, his vision blurred. Veronica caught him as he collapsed, lowering him onto the velvet couch with practiced ease. She brushed a hand over his face, smoothing his curls like a mother tucking in a child. You should have left it alone, she whispered. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was her smile. Jamal's body felt like it was sinking, his limbs too heavy to move. His vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in. But his mind fought to stay awake. He could hear Veronica's heels clicking against the floor, slow and deliberate, like a countdown to his end. You should have been smarter, she murmured, pouring herself another drink. I told you, nostalgia's dangerous. You let it blind you, just like your father did. Jamal forced his fingers to move, gripping the fabric of the couch beneath him. His muscles barely obeyed. The drug was working fast, shutting him down piece by piece. But he wasn't done yet. Veronica crouched beside him, studying his face with something like admiration. I have to admit, you're more persistent than I expected. Your father was the same way. He thought he could win. She reached out, brushing a finger along his jaw. But we both know how that ended. A flicker of rage pushed through the haze in Jamal's mind. He tried to speak, but his tongue felt thick, his throat dry. Veronica stood and sighed, moving across the room to pick up her phone. I really did enjoy having you around, she said casually, as if she weren't planning his murder. But loose ends must be handled. His heart pounded, the adrenaline barely cutting through the drug. He had minutes, maybe seconds before his body gave out completely. Then a sound, a sharp crash, the shattering of glass. Veronica spun around, startled. The front door. Someone was inside. Jamal forced his head to turn, his vision swimming. A figure moved through the dim hallway. A voice called out, "Malik." Jamal felt a surge of relief. His best friend had come. He must have followed him. Must have known this was a trap. Veronica's expression darkened. She reached into a drawer, pulling out a sleek silver pistol. She wasn't going to run. She was going to finish what she started. Jamal gritted his teeth, forcing his fingers to curl into a fist. His body felt like lead, but he had one shot. As she raised the gun toward the doorway, he lunged. It was clumsy, weak, but enough. His weight crashed into her legs, sending her stumbling. The gun fired, a deafening crack, but the shot went wild, splintering the glass table instead of Malik. Jamal hit the ground hard, his vision darkening again. He felt arms grab him, dragging him backward. Malik's voice was distant, shouting his name. Veronica scrambled up, her gun aimed once more. But this time, footsteps pounded against the marble floors. More voices. Police! The estate was swarming. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Veronica froze, her chest rising and falling. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. Jamal, barely clinging to consciousness, let out a weak, breathless laugh. Checkmate! Veronica stood motionless, her grip tightening around the pistol as the chaos unfolded around her. Red and blue lights bathed the grand estate in a flashing glow, shadows dancing across the walls. The front doors swung open, and officers stormed in, their weapons drawn. Malik's voice was a distant hum in Jamal's ears, but he could barely keep his eyes open. His limbs refused to move, the drug still clinging to him like thick fog. Drop the weapon. The order was sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. Veronica turned slowly, her gaze sweeping over the officers, then back to Jamal. Her expression remained calm, composed, always in control. She had spent years mastering the art of deception, of slipping through the cracks of justice. But this time, the noose had tightened too far. Her lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "Do you think this changes anything?" she said, her voice smooth, despite the danger pressing in around her. "You think you've won?" Malik knelt beside Jamal, his hand gripping his friend's shoulder. "Stay with me, man. Help is coming." Jamal's head lolled to the side, but his eyes remained locked on Veronica. He could see it now, the slight tremor in her fingers, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. For the first time, she was the one with nowhere to run. One of the officers stepped forward. "Last warning. Drop the weapon, Mrs. Whitmore." For a moment it seemed she might. Her fingers twitched, her gaze flickering towards the shattered glass on the floor. Then, in a single desperate motion, she raised the gun. A shot rang out. Veronica staggered backward, her silk robe darkening with a spreading stain of crimson. She exhaled sharply, as if surprised, her knees giving way beneath her. The pistol slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the marble floor. Jamal wanted to speak, to say something, anything, but the weight of exhaustion pulled him under. The last thing he saw before the world faded to black was Veronica Whitmore, the woman who had controlled everything, now lying motionless in the house she had built on lies. Jamal woke to the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor, the scent of antiseptic thick in the air. His body felt heavy, but the fog of the drug had finally lifted. A dull ache pulsed through his limbs, a reminder of how close he had come to never opening his eyes again. He turned his head slightly, blinking against the harsh hospital lighting. Malik sat in the chair beside him, his eyes tired but sharp. The relief on his face was instant when he saw Jamal stir. "Took you long enough, man. Thought I was gonna have to start writing your obituary." Jamal let out a weak chuckle, but even that sent pain lancing through his ribs. Malik leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "You were right about everything. The recording, the insurance fraud, the poisoning, it's all out now." The press ran with it, and the cops are building the case. Veronica didn't make it. Jamal swallowed hard. He should have felt something, relief, satisfaction, but instead there was only a strange emptiness. His father's killer was gone, but it didn't bring Marshall Whitmore back. It didn't erase the years of doubt, the grief that had gnawed at him since the moment his father took his last breath. "She thought she'd win," he murmured. "Even at the end." Malik nodded. "She almost did. But you fought back. That's what mattered." Jamal let his head rest against the pillow, exhaustion weighing him down again. His father's voice echoed in his memory. That final recording still burned into his mind. "I know what you did, Veronica. Now the world knew too." Weeks later, the Whitmore estate was stripped of its grandeur, its wealth dismantled by legal battles and scandal. The press swarmed, desperate to pick apart every lie Veronica had built. Her past was dragged into the light, previous husbands, missing records, unexplained deaths. She had been a ghost moving through the cracks of high society, leaving bodies in her wake. But her story was over now. Jamal stood at his father's gravesite, the cold wind cutting through his jacket. He placed a single white rose on the stone, his fingers lingering against the engraved letters. "I got her, Dad," he whispered. "I finally got her." The weight on his chest hadn't disappeared, but it was lighter now. As he turned to leave, Malik was waiting by the car, the engine running. "So what now?" Jamal exhaled slowly, glancing back one last time before sliding into the passenger seat. "Now?" He looked out at the road ahead. "Now I start over. Thank you for watching this gripping story of betrayal, justice, and revenge. What would you have done in Jamal's place? Leave your comments below and share your thoughts and reflections on this emotional and intense story. We want to hear your opinion. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do so to never miss our most thrilling stories. Don't forget to give a like and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos.